The beeping machines told me I was still alive, but the words I heard next made me wish I wasn't. The house sale went through yesterday. I just survived emergency heart surgery, barely conscious, and my son-in-law, Kevin, was telling me he'd sold my $1.5 million beach house while I was fighting for my life. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Your support helps us share these important stories of survival and justice. My name is Bruce Murphy, and I am a 68-year-old widower living in coastal Maine. 2 years ago, I lost my beloved wife, Margaret, to cancer. She was everything to me, my compass, my anchor, my reason for building the life we shared in our little house overlooking the Atlantic. After 40 years in construction, I'd built that house with my own hands as our 25th anniversary gift. Every beam, every shingle, every window frame was placed with love. Margaret's death left me adrift in ways I never expected. The house felt too quiet, the ocean too vast, and my daughter Sarah seemed more distant than ever. That's when my son-in-law Kevin stepped in with what I thought was genuine concern. "Bruce, you're not taking care of yourself," Kevin would say during his increasingly frequent visits from Portland. He's a successful real estate attorney. Smooth professional, always carrying that expensive briefcase with his initials embossed in gold. Margaret would want you to stay healthy. Kevin began bringing me what he called traditional Maine herbal supplements, unmarked capsules he claimed his grandfather had used to live to 95. All natural, he'd assure me, watching as I dutifully took them with my morning coffee. These herbs have been helping Maine families for generations. Looking back now, I should have questioned why a lawyer suddenly became an expert on herbal medicine. But grief makes you vulnerable in ways you never expect. When you're drowning in loneliness, you grab onto any hand that reaches out, even if you can't see what's hidden behind the smile. Over the weeks, Kevin's visits became routine. He'd arrive with coffee chat about Sarah, check on my health progress, and always remind me to take those supplements. "You're looking stronger, Bruce," he'd say, increasing the frequency. "Maybe take them twice daily now." The symptoms started gradually. Fatigue I attributed to grief. Dizzy spells I blamed on age, and irregular heartbeat I figured was stress. Kevin expressed perfect concern about each symptom, suggesting I should see a doctor soon, while continuing to provide those helpful supplements. "You know, Bruce," he'd say, "sometimes the body needs time to adjust to natural remedies. My grandfather always said the old ways work best, but they take patience." I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was family, a professional, someone who seemed genuinely concerned about my welfare after Margaret's death. When you're grieving, that kind of attention feels like a lifeline. On that final morning in March, I followed my usual routine. Coffee, Margaret's photo on the kitchen table, Kevin's heart-healthy herbs with breakfast. I remember thinking how thoughtful he'd been, how lucky Sarah was to have such a caring husband. By 9:30 a.m., my world exploded in chest pain and arrhythmia, so severe I collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. The crushing weight on my chest felt like my heart was being squeezed in a vice. As the paramedics worked on me, I felt myself slipping away from everything I loved. From Margaret's memory, from Sarah, from the life we'd built together. The terror of leaving this world with so much unsaid, so much undone, was overwhelming. Have you ever faced a moment where you thought you might not see tomorrow? That fear of leaving your loved ones behind. I'd love to hear how you found strength in those dark moments. Please share in the comments below. Kevin rode in the ambulance, playing the role of concerned son-in-law perfectly. "I can't lose another family member," he told the EMTs, his voice breaking with what seemed like genuine emotion. "Let me handle everything while he recovers." Those words should have been comforting. Instead, they were the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. The next thing I remember clearly was the steady beeping of machines, and the antiseptic smell that told me I was still among the living. My eyelids felt like concrete, but I managed to force them open to find myself staring at white ceiling tiles. The first 2 weeks had passed in a blur of medications and procedures. Sarah was there, constantly holding my hand. Kevin, too, had been a steady presence, handling what he called the practical matters while I fought for my life. Dr. Martinez, a cardiologist with kind eyes, explained that I'd suffered a massive heart attack. "We had to perform emergency surgery, Mr. Murphy. Your heart stopped twice, but you're a fighter." By the 3rd week, I was sitting up and taking visitors, though I felt weak as a kitten. Kevin visited daily, always with updates about managing your affairs while I recovered. "Don't worry about anything, Bruce," he'd say. "I'm handling all the paperwork, the bills, everything. You just focus on getting better. But something was puzzling the doctors. Dr. Martinez would study my charts with a furrowed brow, discussing my case in hushed tones. My recovery wasn't following the typical pattern, and the EKG readings showed unusual irregularities. Mr. Murphy, Dr. Martinez said during his fourth-week rounds, I want to run some additional tests. Your heart rhythm shows some patterns I'd like to understand better. After 40 years of construction work, I knew the value of an expert who paid attention to details. Whatever you think is best, Doc. He ordered what he called a comprehensive toxicology panel, tests I'd never heard of before. The concern in his eyes was unmistakable. The results came back on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. Dr. Martinez entered my room with a grim expression and closed the door. Bruce, I need to tell you something difficult, he began. The blood tests show elevated levels of digitalis in your system. Very elevated levels. Digitalis, I'd never heard the word. It comes from foxglove plants. We used to prescribe it decades ago, but stopped because it's dangerous. The levels in your blood are high enough to cause exactly the kind of heart attack you experienced. The room seemed to tilt. Are you saying someone poisoned me? This doesn't happen accidentally, Bruce. Someone has been giving you digitalis over weeks, maybe months. My mind raced back to Kevin's herbal supplements. When I mentioned them, Dr. Martinez's face darkened. We need to test those immediately. I'm required to contact the authorities. This appears to be attempted murder. When Kevin arrived that afternoon, Dr. Martinez was waiting with a police detective and the remaining supplements from my kitchen. Kevin's face went pale. Those herbs came from my own research, Kevin insisted, his hands shaking. They're completely organic and safe. I would never harm Bruce. But the lab results didn't lie. Those capsules contained enough foxglove powder to kill a horse. As I watched Kevin answer questions, my mind was at war with itself. This was the same man who'd rushed to the hospital when I collapsed, who'd spent hours at my bedside. How could someone who seemed so genuinely concerned be trying to murder me? Part of me wanted to defend him. Kevin's been nothing but helpful since Margaret died. But I couldn't ignore the evidence. The supplements had come from Kevin. Only Kevin? He'd been insisting I take them, increasing the dosage, watching me swallow them with that encouraging smile. If Kevin had been trying to kill me, then every moment of kindness had been a lie. The grief I'd shared with him, the gratitude I'd felt, all built on deception. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but deep down I knew the truth was simpler and more terrible. The person I'd trusted with my life had been slowly taking it away. The news about Kevin's poisoning attempt spread through my small Maine community like wildfire. My neighbor Marcus, a retired state police detective, knocked on my door the day I got home from the hospital. Bruce, this stinks to high heaven, Marcus said, settling into Margaret's old kitchen chair. But Kevin's smart. A lawyer doesn't leave obvious evidence lying around. Marcus knew we were dealing with a professional. If Kevin did this to you, he's probably done it before. But finding proof won't be easy. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked his network of retired police contacts, but the results were frustrating. Kevin had been careful, very careful. I can't drive to Augusta anymore, but I can sure make phone calls, Marcus told me. Problem is, Kevin covered his tracks like a pro. The library computers showed nothing. Kevin used his own laptop. The supplement capsules were professionally made untraceable. Even his visits were explained as legitimate legal consultations. By the 3rd week, we'd identified similar cases in other Maine towns, but the pattern was subtle. Elderly widowers who'd had health episodes after meeting lawyers about estate planning. Nothing concrete. We need to talk to these men, Marcus said, but Kevin's covered himself legally. He'll claim legitimate legal services. That 4th week, I found myself on a video call with 3 other men who'd survived similar experiences. Frank from Bangor, a 76-year-old retired teacher, appeared first. I met with a lawyer about updating my will, Frank said carefully. Very professional. Brought his own coffee. I started feeling sick weeks later, but doctors said it was just age. Robert from Augusta 71 was more suspicious. The lawyer called himself Kevin Walsh. Very smooth, very convincing, had all the right credentials, but something felt off. William from Portland 69 had the most troubling story. My daughter arranged the meeting. She trusted him because he seemed so knowledgeable about elder law. I never saw supplements. He said legal stress might be affecting my health. As we shared stories, a chilling picture emerged. Kevin hadn't been crude. He'd positioned himself as a legitimate legal professional. gaining access through family referrals. The poisoning had been so subtle that victims never connected their health problems to his visits. "This is sophisticated predation," Marcus said after our group call. Kevin's been using his legal expertise to avoid detection. The fifth week brought more frustration. Kevin had been methodical about destroying evidence. No paper trail, no recorded calls, no witnesses to supplement distribution. His research looked like legitimate case preparation. "We're dealing with someone who understands the legal system inside and out," retired Detective Murphy told us. "Kevin knows how investigations work. Learning that Kevin had targeted other widowers like me was both heartbreaking and empowering. I wasn't his only victim, but I wasn't alone in this fight. If you're an older adult who's been taken advantage of by someone you trusted, please know that speaking up can help protect others. Have you or someone you know experienced elder financial abuse? Your story in the comments might help someone else recognize the warning signs." By the 6th week, we'd compiled what evidence we could, but it was circumstantial. Similar health episodes, similar consultations, similar timing, but nothing that would hold up in court against a skilled attorney. 4 elderly widowers, same pattern, Marcus summarized. But Kevin's a professional. He's made sure we can't prove anything definitively. I looked around my kitchen thinking about Kevin's confidence, his assumption that even if we suspected something, we'd never prove it. "Well, Marcus," I said, feeling cold determination settle in, "it's time to show Kevin that sometimes the best networks are the ones he can't see coming." While Marcus and I were building our network of evidence, something was happening with Sarah that I didn't fully understand at first. She'd been distant since Kevin's arrest, spending more time at our house, but seeming troubled in ways that went beyond worry about her husband. "Dad," she said one evening as we sat on the deck overlooking the ocean, "I need to tell you something. I've been going through Kevin's computer." My daughter looked exhausted, like she hadn't been sleeping. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect appearance seemed frayed around the edges. "What did you find?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Search histories," she said quietly. "Kevin researched foxglove toxicity for months before he started visiting you. Lethal foxglove dose for 180-pound elderly man. Digitalis poisoning symptoms. How long for foxglove to kill?" The words hit me like physical blows. Kevin hadn't just been careless. He'd been methodical, calculating, researching exactly how to kill me. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "He researched my grief patterns. How long do daughters mourn dead mothers? Exploiting family guilt for compliance. Daddy studied me like I was a case file." Over the following weeks, Sarah began seeing Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a therapist in Portland, who specialized in psychological manipulation trauma. I drove her to several sessions, watching my daughter slowly come apart and then begin to rebuild herself. "Sarah, this is textbook psychological manipulation of grief trauma," Dr. Thompson explained during one of the family sessions I attended. "Kevin identified your vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. The revelations kept coming. Kevin had manipulated Sarah's guilt about missing Margaret's final weeks due to work commitments. He'd convinced her that I was becoming confused and needed family management. He'd positioned himself as the solution to problems he'd created. He told me Dad was getting senile, that I had to make hard decisions for him," Sarah told me during one of our evening talks. "He made me feel like I was protecting you by letting him handle your affairs." The therapy process was painful to watch. My strong, successful daughter had been reduced to questioning every decision she'd made over the past 2 years. But slowly, with Dr. Thompson's help, she began to see how Kevin's manipulation had worked. The confrontation came during the 7th week. I wasn't there, but Sarah told me about it later. Kevin had come home to find her packing. "If you choose your poisoning father over me, you'll lose everything," Kevin had threatened. "The house, the cars, your social standing. I'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned your husband during his legal troubles." But something had changed in my daughter. The therapy, the truth about Kevin's research, the realization of how she'd been used. It had given her clarity. "I choose my father over my murdering husband," she'd replied. By the 8th week, Sarah had moved into a small apartment in town and was working with our lawyer to provide evidence for the investigation. The transformation was remarkable, from Kevin's compliant wife to my fierce ally. "Dad," she said one evening as we went through boxes of Kevin's files she'd managed to save, "I have something that might help our case." She pulled out a laptop and several external hard drives. Kevin thought he was so smart, deleting his browser history and clearing his search records, but he didn't know I'd been backing up our home computer to these drives for years. My daughter looked at me with a determination I hadn't seen since she was a child, standing up to playground bullies. I have Kevin's computer files. Everything he researched. Every search, every deleted document, every piece of evidence he thought he'd destroyed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we might actually have a chance to beat Kevin at his own game. Sarah's computer files changed everything. Within a week of turning over Kevin's research history to local police, we got a call that transformed our investigation into something much bigger. "Mr. Murphy, this is FBI agent Sarah Kim." The voice was crisp professional. "I understand you have evidence related to a multi-state elder abuse case. We'd like to meet with you." The FBI field office in Portland was intimidating. Agent Kim, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, explained why federal authorities had taken interest. "Multiple victims across state lines makes this federal jurisdiction," she said, spreading our evidence across a conference table. "Kevin Walsh has been operating across Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts." I felt relief and intimidation. Relief that professionals were taking Kevin's crimes seriously, intimidation at being part of a federal investigation. But Agent Kim made it clear our community network had provided exactly what they needed. The next weeks brought investigation levels I'd never imagined. FBI cybercrime specialists analyzed Kevin's computer files with forensic tools that recovered deleted data. Every search, every research session, every deleted document came back to haunt him. Kevin researched digitalis poisoning for 6 months before targeting Bruce, the cybercrimes expert told us. He studied dosage calculations, symptom timelines, detection avoidance. This wasn't impulse. This was premeditation. Marcus and I watched in amazement as federal investigators built the case we'd struggled to piece together. They found Kevin's pattern across 3 states: elderly widowers, estate planning consultations, mysterious health episodes, convenient legal interventions. Grand jury proceedings began in the 7th week. I'd never been inside a federal courthouse before. Frank Robert William and I testified about our experiences while federal prosecutors presented Sarah's preserved digital evidence. The grand jury found probable cause for attempted murder and elder abuse, Federal Prosecutor Williams announced. Mr. Walsh will face federal charges carrying potential sentences of 25 years to life. The investigation revealed Kevin's operation scope. He'd been targeting elderly men across New England for 3 years, using legal credentials to gain trust and access. The systematic nature, careful research, professional execution. It painted a picture of a career predator. Community support grew as news spread. Our small victim network became part of a larger movement to protect vulnerable seniors. Local organizations began hosting elder abuse awareness sessions. "We're going to protect every elderly person in Maine from predators like Kevin," I told a community gathering. Margaret would have been proud of how we'd turned pain into protection. By the 10th week, investigators had built what Prosecutor Williams called an airtight case. Kevin's research files, victim testimonies, medical evidence, and multi-state pattern created comprehensive, systematic elder abuse evidence. Final weeks brought arrest and trial preparation. Federal marshals coordinated with local law enforcement. Victim support services were organized. Media relations managed privacy while raising awareness. Agent Kim called me on a Thursday evening in late August, her voice carrying satisfaction. "Mr. Murphy, the federal warrant has been signed. Kevin Walsh will be arrested on charges of attempted murder, elder abuse, wire fraud, and conspiracy." I sat in my kitchen looking out at Margaret's beloved ocean, feeling confidence that justice would be served. "Tomorrow morning," Agent Kim continued, "we arrest Kevin Walsh." The call came at 7:30 a.m. "It's done," Agent Kim said simply. "Kevin Walsh is in federal custody." I'd been awake since 5, unable to sleep, knowing this day would finally bring the confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Marcus arrived shortly after, along with Pastor Thomas and several neighbors who'd become part of our support network. They arrested him at his law office, Agent Kim explained when she arrived at my house. "Full federal warrant, computer seizure file confiscation, the works." He seemed genuinely shocked that we'd found him out. Kevin's first reaction, according to the FBI, was typical lawyer deflection. "I poisoned no one," he'd insisted. "These old people get confused about their medications. I was trying to help them manage their affairs." But the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah's preserved computer files, The multi-state victim pattern, the forensic analysis of his research. Kevin's careful planning had become his downfall. By mid-morning, Agent Kim arranged for Kevin to be brought to the hospital, where this nightmare had begun. She felt it was important for the victims to face their attacker with proper security and legal representation present. Seeing Kevin in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit was surreal. The smooth, confident lawyer who'd manipulated me for months looked smaller, older, defeated. But his eyes still held that calculating intelligence I'd learned to fear. "Bruce," he said when they brought him into my old hospital room, "you have to understand, I never meant for anyone to get seriously hurt. It was just supposed to make you sick enough to need help with your affairs." The casual way he discussed attempting to murder me was chilling. "You picked the wrong widower, Kevin," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I built things my whole life. You just destroy them." That's when Kevin made his final desperate play. "You want to know the real plan, Bruce? I was going to have you declared mentally incompetent after the property transfer. Your little investigation would have been dismissed as the confused ramblings of a senile old man." The room went silent. Even Agent Kim looked shocked at Kevin's casual admission of his full scheme. Sarah, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "I choose my father over my murdering husband," she said clearly for the record, and for anyone who might have doubted her loyalty. Pastor Thomas spoke for our entire community. This community protects its own from predators like you, Kevin. As federal marshals prepared to transport Kevin back to custody, he looked around the room at all the faces. Victims, family, community members who'd rallied to stop him. "You have no idea what you've started," he shouted as they led him away. "There are others like me. You can't protect everyone." But watching Kevin get arrested was one of the most satisfying moments of my life, though also terrifying. I kept thinking about how close he came to succeeding. If you're caring for an elderly parent or relative, please be vigilant about anyone who suddenly shows excessive interest in their finances or health. Have you noticed warning signs that someone might be taking advantage of an older family member? Share your concerns below. Together we can protect our vulnerable loved ones. As Kevin disappeared into the federal transport vehicle, I found myself surrounded by the community that had formed around this fight for justice. Marcus, Pastor Thomas, Sarah, Agent Kim, and dozens of neighbors who'd refused to let a predator destroy one of their own. We'd won. Not just for me, but for every elderly person who might have become Kevin's next victim. 12 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse in Portland, watching Kevin Walsh face the consequences of his crimes. The man who'd once seemed so confident and untouchable now looked small and defeated in his orange jumpsuit flanked by federal marshals. The intervening year had been intense with legal proceedings, depositions, and preparation. Sarah had testified before grand juries. Our victim network had provided evidence to federal prosecutors, and the full scope of Kevin's operation had been revealed. The defendant stands accused of attempted murder, elder abuse, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Federal Judge Patricia Harrison announced her voice, carrying the weight of federal authority. These charges span multiple states and involve systematic predation of vulnerable elderly citizens. At 10:30, I was called to give my victim impact statement. Standing at that podium, looking directly at Kevin, I felt a strange mixture of anger and pity. "Your Honor." I began my voice steadier than I had expected. Kevin Walsh didn't just try to steal my money or my property. He violated sacred memories and trust. He turned my grief for my beloved wife Margaret into a weapon against me. He made my own daughter an unwitting accomplice in attempted murder. I could see Kevin flinch at those words, but I wasn't finished. "You didn't just target me, Kevin. You systematically hunted elderly widowers across New England, using our loneliness and vulnerability against us. You researched exactly how to kill us while making it look natural. That's not crime. That's evil." Frank, Robert, and William each gave their own statements, painting a picture of systematic predation that left the courtroom silent. The federal prosecutor then detailed the full scope of Kevin's operation. 4 confirmed victims, Your Honor, with evidence suggesting at least 6 additional cases across 3 states. Total attempted fraud of $1.6 million. Digitalis poisoning administered over months with premeditated intent to cause death. This represents one of the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes we've prosecuted. Kevin's defense attorney made a pathetic attempt to portray his client as someone who'd been trying to help confused elderly clients manage their finances. The argument fell flat against the mountain of evidence showing premeditated attempted murder. At 2:30, Judge Harrison delivered the sentence that had been 12 months in the making. Mr. Walsh, this court finds your crimes particularly heinous because they targeted society's most vulnerable members. You exploited trust, manipulated grief, and attempted murder for financial gain. You are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, $2 million in restitution to victims, and a lifetime ban from any elder care or legal work involving seniors. The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the courtroom. 25 years federal time. I whispered to Marcus, who'd been beside me through this entire journey. Margaret would call that justice. No parole in the federal system, the prosecutor reminded us afterward. Kevin serves every day of those 25 years. As we left the courthouse, our small group of victims had become something larger, a community of survivors who'd turned their trauma into protection for others. Local news crews wanted interviews, but I was more interested in the future than the past. "What's next for you, Mr. Murphy?" a reporter asked. I looked around at the faces of people who'd become family through shared struggle. Marcus, Sarah, Frank, Robert, William, Pastor Thomas, and dozens of community members who'd rallied around our cause. Now the real work begins, I said, thinking about Kevin's warning that there were others like him out there, protecting others. 6 months after Kevin's sentencing, I stood before a packed community center, looking out at faces that had become family through shared struggle and purpose. Today marked the official launch of something Margaret would have loved, a program that turned our pain into protection for others. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying across the room, welcome to the launch of the Margaret Murphy Elder Protection Program. The applause was warm and sustained. In the front row sat Frank, Robert, and William, my fellow survivors who'd helped design this program. Marcus beamed with pride beside them, while Sarah sat with Dr. Rebecca Thompson, both now integral parts of our mission. Margaret's love built our house. I continued gesturing toward the ocean visible through the center's windows. Now her memory protects our entire community. We're here because we learned the hard way that predators target the vulnerable, but communities can protect the defenseless. The program we'd developed over 6 months was comprehensive education sessions for seniors about financial scams, support groups for families, a hotline staffed by volunteers, and partnerships with local law enforcement and medical professionals. Sarah stepped to the podium, next transformed from the uncertain woman who'd once enabled Kevin's deception into a confident advocate. "Dad, I'm proud to carry on Mom's legacy of caring for others," she said, her voice strong and clear. "As the program's victim advocate coordinator, I'll be working with families who've experienced elder abuse, helping them navigate the legal system and find healing." The audience erupted in applause. My daughter had found her calling in our tragedy. After lunch, we moved to my house for the dedication of Margaret's memorial garden. I'd spent months working with local landscapers to create a peaceful space, overlooking the ocean filled with the flowers she'd loved. A granite bench bore a simple inscription, "Margaret Murphy, her love protects us still." This is how we honor those we've lost, I told the gathered crowd, by protecting those who remain. Pastor Thomas offered a blessing over the garden and our mission. "Margaret would be proud," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You turned tragedy into triumph, Bruce. This program will protect countless families from experiencing what you endured." As afternoon turned to evening, over 50 community members signed up as volunteers. Retired teachers, former police officers, healthcare workers, business owners, all committed to protecting our elderly neighbors from predators like Kevin. The formal ceremony concluded at 4 p.m., but people lingered, sharing stories and making plans. As the crowd began to thin, I found myself walking back to Margaret's memorial garden as the sun began to set over the Atlantic. I sat on the granite bench holding the framed photo I'd carried through this entire journey. The ocean breeze carried the scent of Margaret's favorite roses, and for the first time since her death, I felt truly at peace. "We did it, sweetheart," I whispered to her image. "We turned our pain into protection. Kevin tried to destroy us, but instead he helped us build something beautiful. Margaret's love built this house, and now her memory protects our entire community." The waves lapped gently against the shore below the same rhythm that had comforted Margaret during her final days. Our love story hadn't ended with her passing. It had evolved into something larger, a legacy that would protect families we'd never meet. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from Kevin's betrayal to community solidarity, from near death to renewed purpose, from grief to healing. Margaret would be proud of what we'd built from the ashes of our tragedy. As darkness settled over the ocean, I stood and touched the inscription on her memorial bench one more time. Margaret Murphy, her love protects us still. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families to protect, new predators to stop. But tonight, surrounded by the garden we'd created in Margaret's memory and the community we'd built in her honor, I felt ready for whatever came next. 1 year after launching the Margaret Murphy Elder Protection Program, I found myself in a place I'd never imagined, testifying before the Maine state legislature about strengthening elder protection laws. Honorable legislators, I began looking out at the formal chamber. Grief doesn't have to mean vulnerability. It can mean strength to protect others. Our program has proven that communities can effectively shield their most vulnerable members from predators. The statistics spoke for themselves. In 12 months, we'd prevented 15 potential frauds, protected 12 families from financial exploitation, and helped prosecutors convict 3 predators operating across Maine. Our hotline had fielded over 200 calls, our education sessions had reached 1,500 seniors, and our volunteer network had grown to 150 committed community members. The Margaret Murphy Elder Protection Program requests state funding to expand statewide. I concluded, every elderly Mainer deserves the protection we've built in our coastal community. The Legislative Committee approved our funding request unanimously. As I left the State House, I felt Margaret's presence in a way I hadn't since her death. She would have been proud of how far we'd come. The afternoon brought personal joy that had seemed impossible during those dark months after Kevin's poisoning attempt. Sarah's engagement party to Tom, an honest contractor who'd volunteered with our program from the beginning, filled our house with laughter for the first time in years. Mom would love Tom, Sarah told me as we watched her fiancé help Marcus repair the deck railing. He builds things up, doesn't tear them down like Kevin. I walked Sarah down the aisle in our backyard, overlooking the ocean Margaret had loved. Pastor Thomas officiated. Marcus served as best man, and our entire protection program family celebrated this symbol of healing and new beginnings. At 3:00 p.m., the community held a recognition ceremony, naming me Guardian of Maine Elders. The title felt both humbling and empowering. I'd gone from victim to protector, from isolated widower to community leader. As evening settled over our coastal town, I sat alone in Margaret's memorial garden, holding her photograph as I had so many times before. Margaret, I whispered to her image. We turned our pain into protection. I hope you're proud of what we built. Sarah's happy our community is safer, and your memory lives on in every family we help. The ocean breeze carried the scent of her roses, and I felt the deep peace that comes from purpose fulfilled. Our program would continue long after I was gone, protecting vulnerable elders across Maine and beyond. At exactly 6:00 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Mr. Murphy. The voice was elderly female, frightened. My name is Dorothy, and I heard you help people like me. Someone's trying to sell my house while I'm in the hospital, and my family says there's nothing they can do, but I know something's wrong. I looked at Margaret's photo one more time, then stood and walked toward my car. I'll be right there, Dorothy. The mission continued. Margaret's love would protect others forever. Sometimes the greatest betrayal stories teach us the most profound lessons about resilience and redemption. Bruce's journey from victim to protector shows us that even when those closest to us break our trust, God has a greater purpose for our pain. What began as a son-in-law's calculated attempt to murder became a divine calling to shield countless elderly families from similar predators. Like many grandpa stories of wisdom earned through suffering, Bruce discovered that grief doesn't have to mean defeat. When we surrender our hurt to God's plan, He transforms our wounds into weapons of protection for others. Margaret's memory didn't die with her. It multiplied through every life the protection program saved. These betrayal stories remind us that evil often wears familiar faces, but community love always proves stronger than individual malice. God works through ordinary people like Bruce, Marcus, and Sarah to create extraordinary change. Even in our darkest moments, divine providence prepares us for purposes we never imagined. The most powerful grandpa stories aren't just about surviving, they're about thriving through service to others. Bruce learned that when God allows us to walk through fire, it's often to light the way for someone else stumbling in darkness. What story of resilience or community strength has touched your heart? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of triumph over adversity. Together we can build communities that protect and uplift one another.